Rich. So good to see everyone. A few of you, it's been several years. Some last year, some just yesterday. And I'm Paul Metzger, and I'm the director of New Wine, New Wineskins at Mannen University and Seminary. And really thrilled to be with you this weekend, dealing with the theme of Jesus' upside down kingdom and what that entails for us as his followers in our day and our age. And this emphasis that we're going to be after this weekend, it's not going to be so much informational. There will be a lot of information, but our aim is transformational and participational, that we would come together, interact, sharpen one another. I was trained by the Navigators, and one of the leaders at the Navigators, Leroy Imes, said, it's about iron sharpening iron, not cream puffs sharpening cream puffs. And so how do we grow together as the body of Christ as we meditate on Jesus and his word and reflect on it together? And so I'll have the opportunity to share, to introduce to you our MC for the weekend, Jasmine, in a little bit. But as the various presenters will be sharing the Beatitudes respectively tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday, 8 different Beatitudes shared by 8 different individuals from diverse perspectives. Tonight I thought I would just share just briefly the words that precede the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5. And you're welcome to look at the scriptures if you wish. Matthew chapter 4, 23 and following. Matthew chapter 4, 23 and following. And Jesus has been baptized in the Spirit before the Father. He's gone off into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, and then soon after that, or right after that, his public ministry begins. And he says, the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. There's a sense of urgency in Jesus' words and in his life. And people are anticipating. And we come tonight from various situations, various experiences, different expectations even of Jesus. And I love how this goes in verse 23 and following, just preceding his going up on the mount to sit down and share these Beatitudes of the gospel of his kingdom. And it says here in verse 23 and following, and he went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. And some of them were no doubt filled with a sense of desperation and even a deep sense of need. Will this Jesus be the long-awaited Messiah? Is this Jesus the one who will really fulfill Israel's hopes? And will this Jesus truly give me the blessed life? And then he goes on to speak on what the blessed life looks like in his upside-down kingdom. At New Wine, New Wineskins, our motto is building relational bridges through Jesus in contemporary culture. And we're hoping that God will build bridges here relationally through us this weekend. As we sit down, as we interact, as we sharpen. Feel free to ask people to pray for you if you need someone to pray. If you ask me to pray, I won't pray for you. But I'll meditate. No, I will pray for you. Hopefully you'll pray for me. So yes. But I would hope that we'd be sensitive to the Spirit this weekend of how the Lord would lead us to engage one another so that God would transform us together here as his people. So I'm going to introduce now Jasmine Miller, our MC for the weekend. Jasmine is also the student ministry coordinator for New Wine, New Wineskins. She filled that role last year, and Will filled that role before her. Will tag there. And Jasmine has just been a great gift to us at New Wine, New Wineskins as she has coordinated ministry for us amongst the students at Mannen University and Seminary. And so Jasmine will introduce the weekend and then introduce our opening speaker, Sara Mannen, too. So thank you, Jasmine.
Hello. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to have such a good group at the retreat this weekend, and so excited there will be even more tomorrow. I'm going to hit the announcements again about the conference grounds just briefly because I saw some of you come in. The restrooms are right out this door. And this big building here is the dining hall, where breakfast will be at 8:30 tomorrow morning, and there's restrooms on the right side to go up the little stairs. Through that door, the Wi-Fi password is ABCDE 1 2 3 4 5. The hashtag is NWNW Retreat, like New Wine Retreat. There are sign-ups in the back for lots of great things that will be going on tonight, tomorrow, and the rest of the weekend. This is a really special time to get to know other people that are in your community, whether you're coming from Multnomah or somewhere else, as well as to get to know other people. So I invite you to get to know someone new and find out why they're here and why wine is compelling to them, or why particularly this theme of the Beatitudes is compelling to them. Paul used the word urgency, and that's resonating with me in this cultural moment and in this time in history. And what do the Beatitudes have to say to us specifically in this period of time that we're living in, and to us uniquely as believers, to us as this particular body of people, and to us in our own experiences and stories. So thank you for coming here to listen and to participate. It will be good. Tonight I get to introduce my friend Sara Mannen. She's a recent graduate of the seminary, and she grapples with theology in a beautifully brilliant, personal, and beautiful way that I'm really excited for more people to get to hear from. So welcome, Sara Mannen, and yes, Sara Mannen.
So I am Sara Mannen, so we're clear on who I am. As Jasmine said, I graduated this May from the seminary. I have my master's in theological studies, so woo-woo. And it's through the seminary that I became part of New Wine, New Wineskin. I was kind of sucked in through the Buddhist evangelical dialogues, and I haven't left, and they can't get rid of me, so I think they'll have to deal with me. My husband always says that it's not me dealing with him, it's not him dealing with me, it's me dealing with him, but so maybe that's the way they feel about me here too. But I'm going to speak to you guys on blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. And I want to acknowledge up front how weird and awkward it is to talk about this beatitude, because simply teaching and reflecting usually implies some sort of authority or knowledge on the subject, which kind of goes against the very idea of the Beatitude itself, which says we don't really have any spiritual riches of our own to impart. And so I just want to say up front, I know that's kind of just an awkward place to be in, and I know that. So I'm going to do the best I can to teach you guys a little bit about what the Lord has taught me about being poor in spirit. So as I was reflecting on this, in many ways, my own walk with Christ starts with this Beatitude. For those of you who know me at all, you'll know that you could probably describe me as a driven person, just slightly. I'm really goal-focused. I get stuff done. You give me something to do, I'll do it. I'll get it done. That's just how I roll. Obviously, you guys can hear the poverty of spirit I have, like right there. But that's my personality. I'm a driven person. I'm accomplished. That's just who I am. So in high school, I meet this guy through a new church we started attending, and it was an older gentleman in our church. I was doing a C.S. Lewis play for our church. Obviously, good evangelical, my face story starts with C.S. Lewis, right? But he had a joy and a peace that I could not describe, this gentleman did. And he was going through intense personal struggles in his family life, and just pervaded Christ. I didn't know that at the time that's what it was. And I'm like, I want that. I want what that guy has, because that is amazing. I knew I didn't have what he had. And so naturally, being a goal-oriented person, I'm like, I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna figure it out. And so I try over and over again over the course of 6 months, like maybe I just need to be a better person, or like stop the sins in my life, and that will be how I'll get what he had. I'll get that joy and that peace and that love. And over again I fail. And every Sunday as we sit in church, I pray the sinner's prayer. You guys are all probably very familiar with that prayer. I prayed it probably 100 times. I'm not kidding you guys. And then, they do at every good church service where you have a sinner's prayer. What do you have to do after the sinner's prayer? You got to raise your hand, right? I could not raise my hand. I couldn't do it, because that was a public acknowledgement that I was praying this prayer and that I couldn't do this thing on my own. So I get to this point of 6 months of this continual pattern of me failing and praying the prayer and nothing changing in my life. We get to Easter Sunday, and it's like all of a sudden I'm just completely crushed, and I realize I can't do this. And it's as I come to that recognition, like, God, I cannot do this. I can't get whatever he had. I'm not going to be able to get that. So that Sunday, I raised my hand with my family sitting there, bawling my eyes out. Which, if you guys know me, well, the only place I really cry anymore is Dr. Metzger's office, but that's a different story. Not a huge crier, so that was a really big deal for me. And that's the day I consider the day that I was saved, because that's the day God broke me of any sort of pride I had that I could achieve some sort of salvation or some sort of joy and peace. It was once God crushed my perception that I could accomplish that on my own, that I believe was the day that I entered the kingdom, was that day. And so that's where my salvation story starts. And so I think it's a lesson that God teaches me over and over again, because I have pride all the time. And so God gave me incredibly wonderful daughters who crushed my ability to think that I could be a good mom on my own. So, or just life, God brings those things in to keep me humble. But I work in banking, and you guys are going to be like, okay, it's kind of a weird little transition. I've worked in banking my whole entire adult life. It's just the way my life worked out, not how I'd all planned it. And so as we talk about being poor in spirit, spiritual poverty, or being spiritually bankrupt, really having nothing to bring before God, I really think there's a striking parallel to financial bankruptcy. And I want to say right off the bat that if you guys have experienced financial bankruptcy, I am not judging you at all, because I know from firsthand experience dealing with people the magnitude of different causes to that, and how often it is tragedy and the unexpected in your life. So don't all feel like if that's a situation you've been in, that's what I'm saying about you, because I see it all the time. But that what happens in financial bankruptcy is if you come into where I work and you want to secure a debt, you don't have any way to do it. You don't even have a good name that says that you will repay your debts anymore. And I think that this is really our position before God. It's the same way. We come to God with nothing to secure our debts, with not even a good name, a good credit score behind us. Like, God, look at my credit score, it's 781. Like we don't have that at all. And that is our exact position before the Lord. We don't have anything to secure our place in the kingdom of heaven, and not our name, not our righteousness, not our works. And this is where the Lord starts with his Beatitudes and his upside-down kingdom. He starts us with this completely upside-down idea that we come into the kingdom by acknowledging we don't have a place in the kingdom. We don't deserve to be there. How upside down is this from the world we live in? Because the world we live in, any kingdom in our world, what do you have to do? You have to earn your place in that kingdom, right? You work in corporate America, you better climb that ladder. And you're going to climb the ladder by being the best, or by stabbing enough people in the back, or however it is. We earn our place in the kingdoms of the world. We allow people with power, with money, with skill, the self-made man. That's a narrative we hear all the time. And that is what we are told is how we earn a place in the kingdoms of the world. And our God says, nope, We start at the exact opposite place of that. We start by recognizing that we come to the Lord with nothing. We're poor in spirit. And I think the Lord starts here because this gets at the heart of our universal human pride. So many of the commentators will tell you on this beatitude that the Lord starts here and all the rest of them build from it and then it kind of point back to it. It's all kind of building on this beatitude of being poor in spirit. The idea that we depend on God fully. And as I think about this, I see a lot of little kids here. So my daughters are 9 and 11. When my youngest was about 18 months and could start stringing together sentences, her first sentence and her often most repeated sentence was, "I got it." I got it. So trying to put on her shoes at 18 months, "I got it, Mom. I got it." Like as a parent, you're like, "Oh my gosh, you don't got it. Please let me help you." But that attitude of hers, I think is really kind of our universal attitude, right? I got it. We don't say it like a little toddler when we're struggling with our shoes, but it's often how we stand before the Lord and before others. I got it. I got it. And when I was thinking about this, I was actually reading through, that's going to go there. I don't know where to put it. So I'll be like my kids, just throw it on the floor right now. So I came across the story of Peter when right before Jesus' crucifixion. And I think Peter gives us a really beautiful example of what it means to be poor in spirit. And so I wanted to go to Matthew 26, in verse 30 through 35, I'll read it to you guys. "And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, 'You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee.' Peter answered him, 'Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away.' Jesus said to him, 'Truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter said to him, 'Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you.' And all the disciples said the same." And I love Peter because Peter, I think, is all of us in so many ways. He's so enthusiastic, but can you hear his pride in this? Like, "I won't fall away. I won't deny you. I will die with you, Lord." And we all know the story. What does Peter do? He denies Jesus 3 times. And at the very end of Matthew 26, it says, "And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, 'Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.' And he went out and wept bitterly." And I think those tears were the tears of a broken man and of a man whose spirit had been crushed. He knew he was poor in spirit in that moment when he denied his Lord. He loved Jesus. I really do believe Peter loved Jesus. I don't doubt that for a second. But he knew what he'd done. And he knew he had so much pride, like, "I'm going to do this. I'm not going to fall away, Lord. What are you talking about?" And then he does the exact opposite of it. And it's in that moment of being totally crushed by his own sin, by his own inability to do what he said, that he weeps these bitter tears. And I think those are the tears of someone who is truly broken in spirit. And then we know the rest of the story. In John 21, Jesus restores Peter. And this is what I love about this, is at the end of John 21, when he's talking to Peter, he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. So Peter, at the beginning, says, "I will die for you, Lord." And ultimately we know what happens, right? Peter does die for his Lord, but it was after he'd been disabused of any sort of idea that it was in his own strength and his own power that he was going to do that. So the Lord restores him and ultimately says, "You are going to die for me, Peter." But it's the broken Peter who is poor in spirit that goes and dies for the Lord. And I think it's from that too that we all know God uses Peter in mighty ways to establish the church, spread the gospel, bring the kingdom on earth. But it was after his denial and after Peter is crushed in his spirit and knows what he has done and what he is incapable of doing without his dependence on the Lord. So this is Christ's kingdom. This is the kingdom of heaven, and we enter through recognizing our spiritual poverty. We all go through our own Peter breaking experiences, sometimes once, sometimes many times. But I think Peter's just a really beautiful example of it. And it's only fitting that the kingdom of heaven is entered through poverty of spirit because God establishes the kingdom through his own descent to us. It's Christ, the second member of the Trinity, the Son, taking on human flesh, becoming a man, taking on the form of a servant, humbling himself to the point of death. And out of his abundance, he willingly humbles himself so that we might inherit his riches. So God starts us, the Beatitudes start us with spiritual poverty, but this is just a reflection of how God brings his kingdom to earth to begin with. Begins with a God who willingly becomes us, who willingly walks the earth and lives our life, and to bring us into his kingdom. And this is what amazes me about God's upside down kingdom, is God's kingdom doesn't come with power and might in the way that the world thinks of power and might. Because when we think of power and might, we think of the sword, we think of money. You know, it's a force, it's a coercive force that we think of when we think of power and might in this world, right? When kingdoms come in this world, they don't come the way Christ came to establish his kingdom. Christ comes to establish his kingdom. The power that Christ's kingdom comes with is that of persuasive love. It's the power of persuasive love that humbles us. And that is how Christ brings his kingdom. The kingdom of heaven comes through this persuasive power of humbling love, not the power of force that our kingdom of the world come with. And that's why we start with being poor in spirit, because that is how God ultimately brings his kingdom to this earth. So Jesus' promise to those who are poor in spirit is that theirs is the kingdom. So this is a present tense verb in Greek. The rest of the Beatitudes, except for the last one on the persecution, they're all in the future tense. But this one is present, and it says, theirs is the kingdom. This is a present reality for those who are poor in spirit. It's not a future, you're going to get this someday. This is, if you're poor in spirit, the kingdom is now. And so I think there's two, and obviously there's tension in the Bible with the kingdom of heaven being now, not yet, here, not here, and all those things. But for this beatitude, Jesus is giving a now promise to them, for theirs is the kingdom. And I think there's two important things to think about when we think about the kingdom of heaven being present now for those who are poor in spirit. And one is that as a present reality, we have God's abiding presence with us. So we have the abiding presence of God with us through the Holy Spirit as he's uniting us to Christ. And it's because we are dependent and reliant on him. As we depend and rely on him, the Spirit brings out that unity we have with Christ. We experience the Father's love. And in that sense, we experience the kingdom now. I think there's also other sense that's really important as well. And that is that we're part of the kingdom of heaven now on earth, as a community together. So the poor in spirit is not just me, it's all of us. It's all of us who are part of the kingdom of heaven. All of the poor in spirit are part of the kingdom of heaven. And we're part of this community of the kingdom on earth. We're bringing the kingdom. We are living the kingdom now. We're displaying Christ's kingdom rule and his upside down kingdom now. And yes, that one goes before too. So I have just a couple thoughts. I know I'm probably going over, sorry. So as part of the kingdom of heaven, we are those who are spiritually impoverished, or a community of spiritually impoverished together. And so I have just two thoughts I had on what that might look like, because, just thinking about what does it mean that all of us together are spiritually impoverished? Like, what would that look like? What does that even mean for us as the church? We should be a community that is throwing ourselves at Christ's feet together, relying on him. And so there's two things I want to address. One is pride is so insidious in nature, isn't it? It just weaves itself into things. It's almost imperceptible that it's there. And so one of the ways that this is my assessment, you guys can feel free to disagree with me, just let you know. This is Sara Mannen, like exegesis of the church. You can feel free to disagree. One of the ways I see pride in the church all the time is what I call brokenness culture. So So brokenness culture is when I hear this all the time from church leaders and people in leadership, which we're all broken people. I'm just a very broken person. We talk about how broken we are all the time. And I find that really interesting because we all know it's bad to be a Pharisee, right? We've read the Gospels. We kind of get that being a Pharisee isn't what we want to do. So instead of being a Pharisee, now we talk about how broken and humble we are. It's this kind of backwardness. So we're pointing back to our own spiritual, what we think it is to be a good disciple. We know it's good to be humble as disciples and to recognize our sin. So now we point back to that by talking about how broken we are all the time. And I mean, some people can generally say this. This is just an in general Sara opinion. So, but what I find interesting about this is that it can sweep sin under the carpet and not really deal with how terrible some of our sin is. Because we can swipe it under like, well, we're all broken, but I sexually abuse that person, or like we've been hearing from some of our church leaders who won't call it that, but we just swipe it under the carpet. We don't really actually deal with the magnitude of our sin because we swipe it under the carpet of being a broken person like everybody else. That is not spiritual poverty. Spiritual poverty looks in the face of its sin and recognizes how truly awful it is and doesn't try to talk it away under brokenness. So, that's my little rant. You got a little Sara rant, sorry.
Amen. No rant.
Oh yeah, they're working on me not saying sorry all the time. I came from a really terrible church situation and I say sorry a lot, and so I'm trying to break this habit. So if you hear me say sorry and I shouldn't be sorry, you say stop it, don't say sorry.
Spiritual pride, Sara.
Yeah. But that's my first thing. But my question is, if kind of always pointing out our brokenness isn't true spiritual poverty, and I think some of us do it because we're genuinely trying to be like, look, I am a sinner. How do we as a community encourage one another to be poor in spirit but without spiritual showmanship? I don't know what that looks like, but it's something I think we need to reflect on. What does encouraging each other to be poor in spirit look like without it then becoming a competition to be the really poor in spirit? And that's what I mean by pride is so insidious, because it works into these things and we don't even realize it. The other thing I wanted to reflect on is our culture is super divided right now, in case you guys hadn't noticed. Our churches are divided. We've got progressive and conservative breaches in the evangelical church. They're getting further and further apart. The lines politically or culturally in our country are becoming further and further apart. And I was like, if we enter the community of the kingdom through poverty of spirit, shouldn't this be at the forefront of all of the church's dealings with all the communities? So with each other and with the communities in our world and our culture. Personally, I don't see the church engaging the world and culture from a posture that would indicate poverty of spirit. I feel like we often act like once we have entered God's kingdom that we kind of got it all together. Like, yeah, I was a sinner, but now I'm part of the, like we kind of have this position of almost superiority of how we engage. And I'm not saying this is like a general, this isn't like this part of the church or that part or this political party or this party, it's all of us, and me included. So we kind of come with this position of superiority as we engage the different parts of our culture and our world as a community. At least that's my perspective. And especially with those that we disagree with in and outside the church. So how would recognizing that our position is spiritually poor, who are completely dependent on God for everything, not just our salvation, but like the fact that I'm breathing, that I have any skills at all, that's all from God. And it's the same for every one of us here. But how would recognizing that we are spiritually poor, we're completely dependent on God, change the way we view, treat, and interact with those inside and outside the church? How would that change what would it look like to be a community that starts with the poor in spirit in our minds, first and foremost, as we go out and interact with our world? And how would that change our current cultural divisiveness? That's just something I thought might be good to reflect on, because I don't know, I think it might be a game changer for God's upside down kingdoms if we start with that. I think that being poor in spirit is a lifetime thing, that God is always working on that in us. It's so easy to be prideful and to, I do it as I'm coming here, I'm thinking about, I wonder how nicely they're going to introduce me. You're not getting the beatitude, you're teaching on, woman. This is how I talk to myself. So I ran across this great quote, and it's in the William Kelly commentary, and it's talking about this beatitude. And he said, God knows how to bring a man down if he's forgotten his true place. And I think that's something that the Lord does as we struggle with being poor in spirit. So as those who have the kingdom, now we're living it out as God's kingdom ambassadors on earth. May we continually recognize our poverty before a gracious God who lifts us up to be lights in the world. So that's what I have. I do pick up the papers I throw on the floor and let my children, so I'm still working on that. Do you guys' kids throw their socks on the floor the minute they get home and then never pick them up? Could anyone tell me how to get my kids to do that? Because that would be amazing. So.
Thank you, Sarah. And if you do have the answer to that, we'll let you speak this weekend. So we'll just plug the whole system and do that. Hi, I'm CJ Young. I'm one of the AC members for New Wine, New Wineskins. I also work at a church in Port Orchard, Washington. Does anybody know where that is? There's nobody woos Port Orchard. So if you know where that is, no one woos Port Orchard. I'm a graduate from Multnomah as well, and I remember even while I was going, having people explain to me, or try to explain to me, what is New Wine, New Wineskins? And you got a myriad of answers, and I had no clue what it was at all over 4 years. I didn't actually start getting involved with it until after I graduated. And I think because part of it is, even when I first came to my first retreat, I didn't really understand it until you start to experience it. And so you start to engage in the conversations, until you start to see what kind of place it is and the kind of people that get involved in it. And it's a really amazing experience. And so I want to ask today, how many people, this is your first retreat, first time you've gone to any kind of a New Wine, New Wineskins event? Right on. Welcome. I'm really glad of it. Some of you are probably already wondering, what is this? What did I sign up for? Do I have to stay here all weekend? It's a lot of fun, and like I said, our point tonight, though, is to try to encourage you to experience this. And so it's not something, like Paul said earlier, it's not something where you come and consume. If you've been to conferences where there's somebody up front who's always speaking, and you just listen, download it, and then go home, that's not how this is going to work. This is very reflective. This is very participatory. You're a part of this. This conference, you're a speaker as much as anyone else. We don't advertise the people who are going to speak. I don't know if you noticed that when you registered. It's very different, and we have a diversity of people who are going to speak from all kinds of different backgrounds. So what we're going to do next is we're going to spend some time reflecting on the Beatitudes. So what I'm going to do is explain kind of how this is going to work, and then explain our hopes for this activity, and then talk about how we're going to wrap this evening up, and then for tomorrow, and prepare for tomorrow. All right? So if you look back in the back of the room, there are Trudy's being Vanna White. Thanks, Trudy. All right, so over on stage right, or is this stage right? I never know. Stand right? That over there, I'll just point. Okay, over there by Paul are some posters on the wall. And if you look, those are the 8 Beatitudes that we're going to be dealing with this weekend. And so what we're encouraging you to do is on the little white table there are some markers. And there are also papers on there and tell you what the instructions are. What happens there is what we'd like you to do is go to each different Beatitude, reflect on it, and write it in your own language. If that's difficult, then write it in the language you think Jesus might use if he were to speak into our modern culture. How would he say it today? So you're going to do that on that side. On this side, over here, on the left side over here, my left, your right, over here, there's a different one, and there's a little orange table over there. On that orange table are name tags. So first off, if you don't have a name tag, write your name on one and stick it on your shirt. Okay, like I said, there's a lot of new people here, so we want this to be an interactive experience as well. But after that, what we're asking you to do is take a name tag and write down the name of somebody who reflects a beatitude to you. You don't have to do all of them, but take some time and think about who does represent to you someone who is blessed because they're poor in spirit. And we encourage you to put their name, and then underneath that, just a brief, tiny little, why does that person reflect that to you? Does that make sense? And then stick it under there. So they'll have a whole bunch of name tags, so you can try not to cover up somebody else, so let's not be rude. All right, so we'll do that and just kind of hit all those. And then in the middle of the room, how many of you are artists? All right. So those people will teach the rest of us. Okay, in the back there are lots of little tiny, I don't know what you call them, things, canvases that you draw on. I'm clearly not an artist. Okay, and there's some pastels, crayons, colored pencils, all kinds of different mediums to use. Mediums, there's an art word. That you could use, okay? And there's also some easels. So what we're encouraging you to do there is to pick one or two. We don't have enough for every person to do every beatitude, but pick one or two beatitudes, reflect on it, and visually represent it in some way. And then these, we're going to kind of use them and keep them up all weekend. So put them in an easel where you can see them and you can share them. You don't have to put what beatitude you chose. That's what makes art fun, actually. So I'd say I'd leave it blank if you want. If you want to put your name in the back or get the answer in the back, that's up to you. I'll let you determine that. We've left a bunch of time for this. So you have about 45 minutes to be able to engage with all of this. And we do that for lots of reasons. One of them, our hopes are that we reflect deeply. That this isn't just a box check. Okay, porn spread, we rewrite this. Okay, done. I'm going to go back to my seat and wait and stare at the front of the room and hope that they'll get up there and close this evening out so we can get to the games or whatever it is I want to do this evening. Reflect deeply. If you only get to a few things, that's fine. We also hope you'll reflect communally. That's part of the beauty of New Wine. This isn't a silent experience. Talk about it as you do it. Look at what other people are drawing. Look at what other people are writing. Ask them questions about it. Look at their name on their name tag and introduce yourself. Okay? Spend some time getting to know one another. Okay? Just hang out in the room. Like I said, this is supposed to be an engaging activity, something that we are encouraged by one another. If someone wrote something on one of these over here that you agree with, draw a little thumbs up next to it, or a star or something, or underline it, or give your opinion about what they had written. Hopefully something nice. Okay? And then after that, we're going to come back together and we have another last activity that we're going to do all together. And that'll be a little more of an activity that's on our own. And then Paul's going to close us in prayer and kind of talk about what tomorrow's going to look like. Are there any questions? Yep, Sarah does.
I just realized something I said may have been really misinterpreted. I wasn't talking about Kavanaugh. I was talking about a different church leader. So when I was talking about Second Soul, I just sat there and was like, oh my gosh, that could have been taken way wrong. So I just wanted to talk about a different church leader that clearly.
So here's the part where we can decide to make fun of Sarah and like try to make her feel like she's over the coals, or.
I just wanted to clarify myself. So.
Thank you, Sarah.
Right.
Don't say this. We love you and appreciate you. Thank you for speaking your heart. And we extend grace. That's the beauty. I think one of the beauties about New Wine is that this is a place where you're allowed to wrestle with stuff, even in the opening from up here. It's not a prerequisite to have all your thoughts put together. And this is a place where you wrestle with those thoughts to get them together.
We're all just broken.
We're all just You did it. All right. So does everyone understand what the next activity is? Are there any questions? Introverts, don't freak out. We've given you a job to do. So you can do the job next to somebody else, and that counts as socializing, okay? I'm with you, you're my people. All right, so go ahead and do that, and we'll come together here about 8 o'clock. Okay, about 8 o'clock, we'll come back to your seats. Thanks.